This is the Authority Company podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and I love a good old sports metaphor in business. And so does my guest today. His name is Ciarán McArdle. He's the author of the new book, The Soccer of Success, where he details how the game of soccer can help us in business and in life. We're going to get into the current state of football in the United States of America, how soccer fueled his entrepreneurial journey, and how his 90-minute mindset can impact your productivity. Ciarán, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. And so, Ciarán, I want to go way back because I was fortunate enough and old enough to remember the golden age of soccer/football in the United States. So I was a wee bit last, as you people say over there across the pond, when Cosmos were the thing in New York City. So for people who don't remember, the NASL was essentially the first foray of U.S. professional soccer. And they put a lot of money into the league and brought in some huge stars, namely Pele, who people who probably don't even know soccer know the name Pele. And I was too young to realize how great he was. And obviously he had come to the States towards the end of his playing career. But it's amazing for people to, like, when I talk about people like in terms of soccer in the United States, how huge it was for like 2 or 3 years there. So do you remember any of that when sort of like this soccer explosion happened in the late 70s, early 80s here in the States?
I do not. No, my first, I first came to America in 1996. And so we didn't really, but I've heard some great stories about the Cosmos and because George Best, obviously, was one of the great players they brought over. I think there was a semi-final of the Cup and it was in New York. So the Cosmos sent a limo to pick just George Best up from the airport to take him straight out to the bars, thinking, we know he can't say no, so if he gets to these bars, he's going to be useless the next day. Took him out, went all night, took him to Studio 54, got in at 4 a.m, played the next day, was the best player on the pitch. They win the game.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, George Best, one of those guys. And it's funny. So if folks sort of think I'm crazy about this, there's this wonderful documentary called Once in a Lifetime that captures this moment in time. That everyone thought that soccer was going to be a part of the big four. It was going to be, baseball, football, basketball, hockey, and soccer. And then the league went under. And then years later, and you mentioned 1996 was when the MLS came to town right after the World Cup. Yeah. It was played in the United States. And I happen to be living in the New York area when games were being played at Giant Stadium. And then that was the time when they say, here we go again. Soccer's going to be the big five. And it didn't materialize. So let's start there with this relationship between soccer and the United States, because we all know it's the beautiful game. It's a global game. But for whatever reason, it can't crack out of that sort of regional bubble. Like, to an extent, it's now sort of like hockey, where there's certain cities love hockey, and then you go one state over and they're like, they've never heard of hockey. Soccer is like that too, with a lot of regional hotspots. So tell me about this fractured relationship between soccer and the United States.
Yeah, when you said that, it's not one of the hasn't made it to the big five, I would comment yet. I think it's going to happen, right? It just hasn't happened yet. And there's certain markers, I think. So I first came over in 1996 to coach soccer, funnily enough. And when I was in Boston, and at the time, every kid playing was wearing their local town shirts, right? Newton Youth Soccer, the local town shirts, and would wear that. And then, maybe 5 to 10 years later, you start seeing Premier League shirts on kids, right? Oh, that's cool. Fox Sports World was the channel back in the day, and you get one game a weekend, and it could be flipping Bolton against Hull. It didn't matter. You sit there, you watch the whole thing because that was the only game you're going to get at the weekend. And then time progresses, and then you start seeing kids wearing Barcelona and Real Madrid shirts. You're like, oh, great! It's progressing even more. This is wonderful. We're getting more on the TV. And then today, certainly in Orlando, not sure it's the same in Boston, kids are now wearing Orlando City shirts. They're wearing MLS shirts. That's their team. Yeah, you're getting Premier League shirts and Real Madrid shirts, but you're getting these new generation of children that are wanting to watch their local MLS team play and want to play for them. They want to grow up and play for Orlando City. And so there's definitely a trend moving forward about what the top sport that children want to play. And there was a great article several years ago in ESPN, and it was called the David Beckham effect, in that there was a massive cutoff at 14. So kids would play up to about 14 years old, and then they'd stop because, playing high school was like, kind of for girls at the time, things like that. David Beckham came, and all of a sudden it was cool, right? It was cool to be a soccer player in high school. And also there was this downward spiral for American football because of the negative physical nature of it. And so that trend then turned, and we see this rise between 14 and 18 of youth players choosing their primary sport to be soccer. So I think that's going to continue. I see it right now. We're getting these big investments into clubs. We're now getting billionaires owning the Major League Soccer clubs, and so there's real money behind it. The best player in the world has chosen to come and play in the MLS, which is a huge, correct? Yeah, that's a huge coup for the league. And let's hope it continues.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned Barcelona. So my family my father's side is from Spain, and he grew up a fan of Barcelona and obviously the Spanish national team. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2005 before Barcelona just exploded into just becoming the premier team. So I always feel bad about that. And also, he passed away before his beloved Spain won the World Cup a couple times along the way. So it's been amazing to see the growth in that. But the reason I bring up my dad is and you talk about access. Growing up, my father's only way to listen to Spanish La Liga, is called in Spain, football games was through shortwave radio. And he would have this giant boombox. He would have it in our family room, and I would wake up Saturday, Sunday morning to just static. My father would be listening to static just to make out play-by-play of soccer. And to me, it was, as a kid, and again, American kid, I didn't really get it. Like I understood that he was passionate about it, obsessed with it. And I was equally obsessed in baseball and football. But the idea that he would go through any lengths, because there were no satellite dishes, there were no cable TV. And again, it's just like the lengths people go for something they love. And I feel so bad. And you also mentioned earlier, just the access to it, the amount of games that you can see in any given week, whether it's through the Paramount Plus, whether it's through Peacock, NBC Sports, and Univision. I mean, there's so many ways to watch soccer now. That, I think, is a huge breakthrough. Like the idea that you can actually access it.
Massive.
It's my thing though is, Ciarán, is that it needs a star, a homegrown star. And I know Pulisic is pretty huge, and he's been very successful overseas, but I don't think we're going to make that jump to be one of the huge sports until we have that Michael Jordan, if you go way back in football, the Johnny Unitas, Joe Montana, in baseball, it was, Babe Ruth. And then obviously you had huge stars over the last 100 years playing that sport. So what's your thoughts on a homegrown star, maybe being the thing that sort of tips the scale?
Yeah. And rather than, if we just take it down to a regional level, again, I'm going to talk about Orlando here. If there was a homegrown star, a 16 to 20-year-old local kid that was playing for Orlando City, we would sell out every game, and it would be the talk in town, right? It's just, that's it, because it's the same back home. It's the same in England. When they have a local academy player playing, then the stadium is not just full, but the excitement, the buzz around it, because it's just such a great thing to have, right? And so if we can get those, there's two parts to it, because I wouldn't class Pulisic as a homegrown, because he went to Borussia Dortmund. That's where he got his trade at 14, right? So is he homegrown? He was kind of plucked away. But if we can, and MLS academies are really trying to do a much better job with this now. If we can get homegrown players through the system and to represent their local MLS team, and stay in the MLS, right? Not necessarily go over to Europe, but stay in the MLS, then it's going to boost the league enormously, because back in the NASL days, you kind of get players at the end of their career coming over, right? Like Belair and George Best and all that. We're now getting European players, not at the peak, but certainly not at the end of their career, choosing to come to the MLS to play. Better lifestyle for them and for their families and things like that. And so we're getting some good years out of these top players. So if you can combine that with homegrown talent, then we're really onto something.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things too, where with the again, the very sort of like jingoistic, you're like people want to root for an American, but also like there's that thread of, yeah, if you're an American and you're really good and you love football, you want to play for Man City. You want to play for Barcelona. So there is that pull, even if they're today, a child is born that becomes like the American version of Pele, his instincts may be like, yeah, I'd rather go play in the Premier League.
Can't keep him. Can't
States.
keep him. No, you just can't keep him. But it's a snowball effect, because if you can start keeping one or two players and the next youngsters that come up, because it's not just the crowd in the stadium, it's who you're playing with, because playing with great players makes you a better player, right? So, all right, I'm going to go play with Man City because I'm surrounded by these amazing players. That's going to elevate me as well as the paycheck. But if we can start keeping those in the MLS, then it can have that snowball effect. However, top players, homegrown players leaving and going overseas, if that's going to boost the national team, just as good, right? Because we want to root for America on the national team basis as well, and get that excitement, because that will then trickle back down to the leagues and to local. If the USA are doing incredibly on the national level, then it helps everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you for humoring me there for a few minutes there. I know that's not the jux of our phone call, but like I really appreciate humoring me. So let's move on to you. You talk about the fact that you came here in the 90s and you began this journey that led you to write The Soccer of Success. So let's get there. Like, let's talk about how you turned your passion for soccer, coaching soccer, into an entrepreneurial venture. So take me through that, because I think a lot of people, coaching works in the United States where you start in a low rung and then you kind of get to a certain level. And then for many, they have to leave the country for higher pay and stuff like that. But so you came here, started coaching. When did you realize, okay, I need to do more than just be a coach?
Yeah, because when I first came over, I was actually, I was still at university in England. I was doing a degree in electronic engineering. And then I did my master's in avionics, right? Not very relevant to the game, but I only did it so I would play soccer for another year at college. So when I came over, the company I worked for in the summertime, called Play Soccer in Boston, they said, why don't you, when you graduate, when you come over and coach for us full time? And I was offered a job with an engineering firm in England. I was like, oh, do you know what? I'll do it for 1 year, have the fun year, and then come back and get a grown-up job. And I never left. I came over. I loved it so much. I'm like, do you know what? I'm still young. I want to do this for as long as I can. So I was doing my coaching, and then I kind of progressed with the company, took over the coaching department. And it was within that journey that I kind of fell in love more with the business side of it, rather than the actual being on the field coaching. And I had, you have, there's a phrase that kind of try and get as many mentors as you can, but they don't have to be in-person mentors. Successful people leave clues in books, right? And I remember reading like Richard Branson's books and thinking, wow, what a journey that guy's got. What an entrepreneur. He kind of started with nothing and then went up and did all that. And so I love reading, and I would kind of read all these books about entrepreneurs and like, yeah, that's what I want to do. That really interests me. And so myself and along with my business partner, Chris, we started our first business and in 2001, and really just classic startup entrepreneurial, sleeves rolled up, do everything. You're the dinner lady, you're the cleaner, you're the sales, and you do everything you can, and then the journey progressed from there.
And what was that initial thing? Because I think it's one of those things where we get the idea of, okay, so if you want to be an entrepreneur in soccer, it means you got to own a soccer club or coaching.
Yeah.
Of some sort. What was the thing?
So our first company was called XL Travel, and that was, we took youth soccer teams, club teams, college teams, initially from the USA over to England on a 10-day soccer tour. And the whole premise was we wanted them to get a feel of what it was like to be a professional player in England. So that we would get them trained by the local academy players. They would stay in the same hotels that the pro players stay in. And we would go to the live games. And so it was kind of a 10-day all-inclusive soccer trip. We started that it was August of 2001, a month before 9/11. So not a great time to start a boutique international travel company, right? It was the worst time you could possibly start, because nobody wanted to fly, nobody wanted to go anywhere. But we stuck at it and we kept going, and that company still exists today. We have operations in 35 different countries that we send teams to. And we have customers in 24 different countries that come and use our services, and it's awesome. There's nothing like going to a live European soccer game, and so that is kind of it. It also helps the youth here, because when our young players go overseas, let's take American teams for example, go overseas, They get fueled by that. They see the passion. They see that it's just everything come back, and then it puts fuel on their soccer fire.
I love that. Yeah, it's a bucket list for me to go finally see a game in Barcelona to, pay tribute to my father, because I don't even think he never been. No. Yeah, I got to do it. And it's funny because let me divulge more about my personal life. But Ciarán, my father grew up in northern Spain, which is Galicia, and so I like to joke that's the Jersey Shore of Spain. It's nowhere near Madrid or Barcelona. It's just like this nice, quaint little fishing town. So he never really got to travel much either as a kid. So he came to the States when he was in his 20s. So it's one of those things like he never had the opportunity to do so. And then he had a family. So the last thing he was going to think about was, hey, let me go to Barcelona, watch a football game. So I'll have to hit you up for advice when I make that trip eventually to Barcelona. All right. So this all leads you to write this book. And the framework that you talk about is the hat trick of success. And one of the things that we should probably mention for folks who are not like sports fans, a hat trick means 3 goals. It's synonymous in hockey and in soccer football. Tell us about that framework and why it's sort of like the central piece of the book.
Yeah, so the hat trick of success is plan, perform, recover, which is a circle rather than a straight line, because it never ends. And it's all about that. And an whole premise of the book is soccer. The soccer gives us lessons about how to do other things in life, like be successful or run a business or be a better parent and all these things, right? Because if you take the plan part of the hat trick, which is, there's a classic phrase which goes something like, there's no point climbing up the ladder of success if you're leaning against the wrong wall. So we have to actually plan our life, right? And we start off with aspirational goals, what do we want our life to look like? And then we bring it down to, what's my 3-year goals? And then with our annual goals. And it all comes down to, when you have all those in place, then everything that you plan on a daily basis, the things that you plan are all part of your aspirational goals, because that's where it trickle down from. So planning is just so important. Just like in the game of soccer, that the manager just doesn't go, all right, guys, go out there and play. If you're playing against Real Madrid versus Carlisle United, then you want a different plan. So it's all about the planning. Otherwise, you can kind of just whistle through life and just plod along. So there's our planning part. Perform. Planning is a dream, which is nothing without the action, right? You have to actually perform. You have to get stuff done. You have to put in the effort. And some people may think that's the hardest part. It's actually the easiest. If you've got the plan, then you know how to perform, right? In the book, we talk about plan like a bee, work like a horse, all right? A horse doesn't care if it's raining outside. A horse doesn't care if it's tired. A horse doesn't care what time of day it is or what his horse girlfriend has said to him the night before, right? Just performs, just goes out there and trains. So we have plan, we perform. And then probably the hardest part of the hat trick for kind of alpha, really gung-ho entrepreneurs is the recovery, because you have to recover. You can't be working 24/7. It's a physical and mental recovery of it. If you look at professional players, they have little breaks when the ball goes out of play, when there's a free kick, little mental, little physical break. Then they have a break at halftime, 15 minutes. Then you have a break at the end of the game till the next training session, which is a bit longer. Then you have the long weekends, and then you have a 4-week break in between seasons. So we can emulate that in our recovery process. Otherwise, we're just going to burn out. And so, again, it's a circle: plan, perform, recover, back to plan, perform, recover. And that hat trick of success has different time frames, right? That can be an annual plan, an annual performing, annual recovering. So you're planning on an annual basis, all the way down to, what's the first hour of my day look like? All right, I know I'm going to do that. I'm going to perform for 15 minutes, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then I'll back around to doing it again and again and again and again. So it never ends.
That's great. That's awesome. And I guess there was no way for you to avoid soccer puns through this entire book, right? You couldn't.
Otherwise, it'd be a terrible title.
Yeah, you couldn't like control yourself because you talk about the 90-minute mindset, and for folks who are not soccer fans, soccer games are 90 minutes, 45-minute 2 halves. So talk about that, the 90-minute mindset.
Yeah, we'll go further into it in the book, but if you look in a typical day of a typical person, me, you, whoever, when you take out your commute and your lunch and your email and the incoming tasks that you get and the distractions and the chat by the water cooler and this, that, and the other, you really only have 90 minutes a day of focused output. And so that is so important that you carve out non-negotiable time of 90 minutes a day to get your two most important jobs of the day done with a little halftime break, of course. So your 90 minutes. And that 90-minute mindset is it's not email, right? It's not taking a phone call. It's making a phone call. It's all outgoings, all focused project-based tasks that are relative to the thing you plan for. And so if we can carve out that 90 minutes every day, some people don't do 90 minutes in a week. If we can carve out 90 minutes every day and get that out, we're way ahead of our peers. We're way ahead of anybody else. But it's got to be the correct 90 minutes. This stupid thing has to be turned off, right? Otherwise, you're just going to get distracted, okay? So it's fully focused, 90 minutes to win your day.
Nice. I want to pull on one of the thread from the book. One of the anecdotes you talk about Leicester City, right? For folks not familiar, a few years ago, it's actually probably going on almost 10 years ago now. That small little club where most people probably could not find it on a map somehow won the Premier League that was dominated by these household names of Man City, Man U, Chelsea. People who don't know soccer know these clubs, and then one year, this team comes out of nowhere and wins the Premier League. Why was it important for you to include that story in here? About, I guess, a lot of it has to do with teamwork and such. But tell us about why it was important to include this in the book.
One of the reasons is, funny if I was thinking about this exact point today. This is going to sound controversial, but I challenge you to challenge it. It's the greatest sporting achievement of all time. Not soccer, sport. It's the greatest sporting achievement of all time. The equivalent being if a brand new franchise enters the NFL, which happens all the time, right?
Like an expansion from winning, like being created and next year winning the Super Bowl. Impossible.
But not only that, because you can create that and then pull top players in. But imagine a brand new franchise coming into the NFL and only having players from the tier below. Right, and the first year you stay in the NFL, you come pretty bottom, but you stay in it, and then next year you win the Super Bowl, and you're actually playing 38 games, not 16 or 17, over 38 games. I would challenge anyone to say what is a greater sporting achievement than that. There isn't one. It's amazing, and the important part. One of the reasons I wanted to put that in the book is the importance of teamwork. Right, these guys were. The sum was greater than the individual parts. It was a bunch of guys together believing, which is huge. They had a plan. It wasn't just go out and win every game. They had a plan for it. Everybody was great at their certain parts. There's another part in it about, there's 3 qualities that you have that you should be focusing on every day. A goalkeeper should not be learning how to take corner kicks or free kicks. Right, you have 3 qualities, and Leicester did a great job of keeping their players in their box of what are my 3 qualities, and it was also a lesson of egos. There was no egos on the team because there was no superstars. There was no $100 million players on there, and so that is when you dig into what they did that season. And I don't think Nottingham Forest may rub this in my face, but I don't think it'll ever be done again as well. I think it's a once in a lifetime event.
Now, and I'm gonna do a little devil's advocate here with you, Ciarán, because yes, win that title, amazing. But you look at the aftermath of that; they have not been able to maintain that greatness. As we're recording this, I believe they're like 18th in the Premier League. And I think this could be an American thing, Ciarán, because I know in the Premier League gets complicated into regulation and just making sure you stay in the Premier League. We're not going to get into that part of it, but I'm just talking about here in America, we have this sort of like standard of greatness. Like if you're not great, you're nothing. So in the Leicester's case, they had that crowning achievement that you mentioned, arguably could be one of the greatest upsets of a underdog of all time, but they weren't able to maintain that. So talk about that in terms of keeping your greatness continuous as opposed to being a one shot in the dark kind of situation.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the game, and it's not just soccer, any sport, is so they won that, they did it. Who cares? It's next season. right? There's a great book. Do you know Tim Grover? He's written a couple of books. One's called Relentless. He was the private trainer of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
Wonderful books. And he starts it when he talks about winning. It's almost like a poem, the first 3 pages, and it's amazing. He's talking about winning. It's the thing that when you walk through it, it then slams your door in the face, right? It climbs to the top of the mountain, and then it throws you off because you start all over again. Leicester did this. Doesn't matter because they got relegated a couple of seasons later, and they're starting over again. But for the NFL analogy, imagine that new team that went and won the Super Bowl. Imagine in the off season, their 5 best players then got stripped out and they went to a different team. That's what happened to Leicester. So greatness in the Premier League can also be a negativity because these players then just get pulled by the big boys and they leave them, right? They leave, strip the team naked, they get their payouts, and then they have to start all over again. There's Jamie Vardy is probably the only player that who could have went and got a massive contract somewhere, and he stayed loyal. His story, if you haven't read about that, is fascinating. He started off in the lower leagues. He was basically had a part-time job playing soccer and just progressed as an adult. Progress, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's stuck with Leicester is because they gave him his big break when they didn't have to, and then he's been super loyal to them.
Wow, that's cool. That's awesome. Thank you very much for countering that, because I think especially Americans, we're just all about greatness. And then what also is funny too, though, Ciarán, we're recording this around Super Bowl time, and we also get to a point where we get annoyed by it. So using your football, like everyone's just kind of over the Kansas City Chiefs. It's like, well, please no more. We're sick of you. So there is this funny balance of like, yes, we want everyone to be great, but then all of a sudden, yeah, we get tired if you're being great for too long. I mean, that happens in the Premier League a lot too, right?
But what is greatness? You have, again, I talk about it. You have a player that can have a 20-year career in soccer, not very well known, but has a 20-year career, a wonderful career, and can look after his family for the rest of their lives without being a superstar. Why is that not great? Greatness is in the eyes of the beholder, right? And we have many players that come, they take a spike like this, look like they're going to be great, and then a big fall from grace. And they would probably, in hindsight, have loved to be in that 20-year career of being a low-key player and being financially secure.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. All right, so let's talk about the legacy of this book, because first of all, you have a couple hurdles, Eric, here. We talked about the struggles of American soccer and breaking through, but we're seeing it on an upward trend. That hockey stick is forward. So how does you connecting with a new audience of people that maybe not familiar with soccer? Like, let's start there. Like, people who don't know a lick about soccer, who barely know a little more than I do, can they learn from this book? Well, can they? Are there more takeaways than it just a regular aficionado of football would take from this book?
Yeah, the first point being, and I didn't mean for this to happen when I wrote it, but you can take the word soccer away and insert any sport. The sport in general is a lesson for life because of the teamwork and the practicing and the never giving up and the tenacity and the planning. I mean, plan, perform, recover. Nowhere there does it say soccer, right? Plan, perform, recover. It's just that sport shows us how to do that in life. And so any sports fan can relate to it. I've had some parents reach out that never played soccer and said, my kid plays soccer, so I got it. And wow, I really like it. I love it. I have a school called Excel, shameless plug, Excel Academy, and it's a full-time private school but for soccer players. So they come and they have school all day with teachers in the classrooms, real curriculum, but they train every day. And we'd given them this book as their leadership lesson, and they have just loved it. And so I think it probably shows what a simple writer I am, is that kids can understand it. And so I didn't realize that when I wrote it, but they really embraced it. And these are kids who love soccer. But I would say it's an easy read, and therefore it can appeal to many, many people.
Awesome. It's a wonderful read. He is Ciarán McArdle, the author of The Soccer of Success, How the Beautiful Game Can Help You Achieve Goals in Business and Life. Ciarán, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And that'll do it for this episode. If you want to find out more about Ciarán and our other authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.